Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm Sarah Williams and I'm the host of the Tough Girl podcast. And today I'm absolutely delighted that we're going to be speaking to Rennie McGregor. And Rennie is a registered sports and eating disorder specialist. She has got so many things after her name. She's got BSc Honours, a PGDIP in diet, an RD, a PGCERT in sports nutrition. She's got over 14 years experience and knowledge in nutrition, including experience working with elite athletes, coaches, sports and science teams. She's also the author of Training Food, which went straight in as a #1 bestseller on Amazon in fitness training. She is a regular contributor to BBC Food, Trail Running Magazine, Running Fitness, Outdoor Fitness, and Here's Health Magazine. Rennie, it is absolutely fantastic to get you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. You caught me on a Sunday morning just before we're trying to pack up to go to Cornwall for a week, but it's all good. It's all good.
Oh no, that'd be absolutely fantastic. You know, I'm so excited about getting to speak to you about nutrition and training and supplements and combining food and all the different myths that are out there, because I think food is something which is so ingrained in our society, and everyone has these connotations with food. And whether you're growing up and you're told, eat all your vegetables and, you won't get your dessert if you don't do that. Or, one for me that I do is I think, I've had a particularly hard training session or I've had a really bad day. And I just think, do you know what? I deserve that chocolate bar. I'm going to have that ice cream. I deserve it. I should have it. And there's so many things around food and eating and body message and body image and wellness. So it'd be really fantastic to go through and talk a lot more about that. But before we go on to that, it would be really fantastic if you could just tell everyone just a little bit more about you and who you are.
So I'm, as you pointed out, I'm a performance and clinical dietitian. And people go, what does that mean? What's the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist? I guess the real difference is that anybody could call themselves a nutritionist. So, if you look at the media, if you look at the internet and you put in the term nutritionist into Google, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people will come up. And it's really hard, I think, for the general public to decipher who's actually qualified and who's not. So the reason I stick with my dietitian is because actually it's a protected term. And only if you've done a degree in dietetics can you actually call yourself a dietitian. And that's because we're regulated. We're regulated by the Health Professions Council, which means that the messages we give out as dietitians have to be evidence-based. We can't just make up our own rules as we go along. And also with that evidence, it has to be credible studies, because the other thing about the internet, as wonderful as it is, you can cherry pick the advice you want to get. So if I wanted to find an article that tells me that gluten's bad for me, I could. But the difference is that when you're a dietitian or a scientist even, you'll be very, very careful about the studies you use to kind of to provide you with the evidence you need for your practice. So I guess that's kind of the difference between me. My interest in nutrition started years ago. As a young girl at school, I loved biology, but I really also loved chemistry, but I didn't enjoy that kind of, put copper with this and what happens. I know a lot of people love the explosions, but I was really interested in what happened inside the body. So I actually went off to do a degree in biochemistry, which I absolutely loved and really found it fascinating how the body works at a biochemical level. So all the different nutrients, all the different things that we eat, how they're digested and utilized, and how the body can then perform optimally, I guess. And from that, I realized that I didn't really want to work in a lab. I didn't want to sort of be doing the research. It wasn't really my area at that time that I wanted to research. So I had a very good tutor at the time, and he suggested that dietetics might be the best option for me. So I went on to do a postgrad in dietetics, and I became a clinical dietitian a few years later and worked within the NHS for about 5 years in total, just doing different clinical roles, but mainly my roles were pediatric adolescent eating disorders. So I got a real kind of feel for what it was like to be working with very sick people. I then had a bit of a break. I say a break. People will go, you never really had a break, Rennie. But I had two girls, two daughters, and I had them quite close together. And during that time, I was kind of always like reviewing, what do I want to do next? What do I want to do? And I've always been very, very sporty. At school, I was always in the netball teams and hockey teams, and I did a lot of swimming. And so I've always been very, very fit. And I guess as I got older, I was doing a lot more running and things like that. And friends would ask me, well, what would you eat? What would you do? And I'm maybe rightly or wrongly, I'm somebody that really likes to feel like they know what they're talking about. So while I had a dietetic degree, I understood the biochemistry, I still felt like in order for me to really be able to give advice, I wanted to know it, do it properly. And so I decided that while my kids were younger, so while they were still in their nappies, I enrolled on a postgraduate course in applied sports nutrition, which was really great, and I loved it. I mean, don't get me wrong, trying to get up at 5 a.m. to cope with your little one and then write essays till midnight was never easy, but it was worth every single minute because after that I felt like I that was the area I definitely wanted to go in. I've not really looked back since then. I've kind of very much focused on sports nutrition. And while I presumed that I would only work in sports nutrition, the more you work in sports nutrition, the more you realise that there's a real overlap with eating disorders. And then more recently, I've been involved with 2 Paralympic sports. And so that's been really good for me because it's made me realise that, my clinical background hasn't gone to waste either. And, in Paralympic sports, you've got so many different disabilities you have to work with. And a lot of them do have an impact on things like digestion and absorption and what is actually achievable. You can't put the same information to somebody who has got, say, a particular genetic disorder compared with somebody who's had a bowel resection because of an accident. So there's lots to think about. So I feel like finally, after being qualified for all this time, I actually feel like I've really found my feet in terms of sports is definitely my focus, but I like working with lots of different individuals within that umbrella. So, the Paralympic sports, the eating disorders, but then also very much the endurance type sports. So I do a lot of work with some very well-known endurance runners, ultra running and marathon running. So yeah, that's kind of it's quite a long description of what I've done, but that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Do you know what I love is the fact that you followed your passion even from that young age at school, whereas the biology and the chemistry, and you didn't like copper and the magnesium and throwing it together, but actually finding the food and I can't even say this word, dietetics, and then just going on to follow your passion and having two daughters and then studying at the same time. I mean, what a huge commitment. I mean, there are so many things in there that I will almost want to go back and talk to you about. I mean, I suppose what would be interesting is where to start is that I personally, I don't think I necessarily have like issues with food, but you go through these stages where it's eat clean or you paleo or you're following the caveman. Everybody has an opinion on food and what they should be doing. And I totally understand that it's very, very, very sort of individual. But for you, growing up, did you feel as though that you were getting it right? Does that make sense? Where I'm going?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm smiling here to myself because I probably had the most horrendous diet ever when I was a kid. I grew up. My mum and dad are Sikh, so I grew up in a very typical Asian family where you have lots of food. Food is everything. My mum's a real feeder, and I guess it's one of those interesting setups. I was, born in the UK, brought up in the UK, but had that Eastern influence in my life. And in some ways that was wonderful, having two different outlooks. You know, you've got the Western outlook through school and your peers, and then you had the Eastern outlook from your parents. But in other ways, it was also really hard because I felt like sometimes I didn't know who I was, if that makes sense, because was I the sort of duty-bound, dutiful daughter that went to the temple and learned how to make chapatis and all that, or was I the kind of the typical teenager wanting to go out and party and meet boys and have a bit of fun? You know, there was always that kind of struggle within me in what I wanted to achieve. And my parents are wonderful people, but I think they also struggled with knowing which direction to kind of support us in. And the one thing I would always be very, very grateful to with my parents is that they sacrificed everything in order for myself and my sister to get a really good education. Because again, while they were growing up, they were very much under that influence of you don't need to educate daughters particularly. You know, it was very negative sort of impact. You know, they'd always get questioned, why are you sending your daughters to that school, and why are you encouraging them to do well, and why are you sending them to university? You know, there was always those questions, and they regardless of that, they just pushed on and on and on. And I'm so grateful, because I really wouldn't be where I was here now if it wasn't for all that basic, that kind of start in life, really. In terms of my eating, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I guess it's like anybody. I suppose I was always under the influence of what I was fed while I was younger. And then as I went to university, I'm probably like no other student. I was just like, oh my God, I've got to look after myself now. What am I going to do? And I'm not going to sit here and lie. I did live on cereal and toasties for quite a long time. But once I started my course and once I started to understand more about nutrition, you go away and you read more. I think I've always been very much about that question. Well, what is it? What is healthy eating? And I ask that question when I work with anybody new, particularly if I'm working with somebody who's got an eating disorder. I'll say, well, what does healthy mean to you? What is it? Because I think over the years, the messages about healthy eating have become really tainted and really confused. And for me, healthy eating is unrestrained eating. So, you know, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going on holiday later on today. So my diet may be a little bit more relaxed. It will mean a bit more chocolate, maybe a few cream teas, and perhaps a couple more glasses of red wine than I would normally have. But then I'll have weeks where actually, you know, every day is kind of more based on the guidelines, I guess, that you hear of, you know, whole grains, fruit and veg, protein, essential fats, and maybe not quite as much chocolate. And for me, it's like the balance over several weeks that I worry about more than every single day getting it right. And I think that's one of my bugbears at the moment about all the different wellness bloggers and celebrity bloggers is you know, the attribution that only if you do this every day will you feel happy. Only if you do this every day will you be well. And I think that's really wrong, because it causes guilt. And food should not be something we feel guilty about. Food is something our body needs, and we need to nourish our bodies and nurture our bodies and enjoy food. But also food is very sociable. You know, it's a big part of who we are as human beings. You know, we all like to go out and have a meal. We like to throw parties. We like to have barbecues in the summer. You know, it's a very important part. And if you can't join in because you are starting to live your life by certain rules and rituals that are being promoted towards you, then to me that's quite dangerous.
I completely agree as you were talking about that, because I do go through stages, especially when I was training for the Marathon des Sables. I was very, very controlled about what I was eating, and I almost had to be. I thought I was about a year before, I thought I was being incredibly healthy. I'd start my day with this big glass of orange juice. I'd had this big bowl of fruit and oats, and I was making, you know, pancakes, protein pancakes, and covering them with honey. And then I was reading Deliciously Ella and how you could make these like chocolate brownies, but they were healthy for you with like maple syrup and algarve and all these nuts and everything. But I was sort of smashing half a tray almost every single day, not realizing that actually everything I thought was healthy was basically just feeding like this candida and this yeast overgrowth. And I think it's true what you say is that actually you start to feel really guilty. And I know that I could talk about food and protein shakes and what you eat and when you eat it and what time you eat it. And I try and go very, very low carb and high fat, but you do start introducing these rules. And I think that's what you said before, is that sometimes the more reading you do, especially if you want to read up on the subject and know more about it, then almost the more confused you can end up being, thinking, oh, actually, should I be having quinoa, or do I need to stay away from all grains? Do I need to take gluten out of my life? Are carbohydrates okay? And it can be sort of incredibly confusing. You've got your 2 daughters as well. And I think a lot of children are obviously influenced by eating in the family home and how their parents eat and how they communicate with their children, either verbally or non-verbally. And you want to make sure that you're not negatively impacting on them with, even around their body image and what they're eating. How do you manage to maintain that healthy eating and that balance while you were training for, say, your marathons? And I know you've done like a 50-mile an ultra race. How did you get that balance right?
I mean, one of the things I try to address very much so, even in training food, is that, whilst when you're training for a marathon or any event, yes, you need to pay a bit more focus to what you're eating and drinking and taking on your runs and that kind of stuff. You don't have to necessarily change the balance for your family. You just need to give them different amounts, So a lot of the recipes in training food. I mean, when we started working with the publishing company, one of the things they said to me was, really, we really need this book to appeal to people like you who are training, racing, and they have a family, because that's what the majority of people want. And so I sort of just started thinking about what I do and how we eat as a family. And I mean, my kids are great. I've been really fortunate that I've not had many issues in terms of fatty eating or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, everybody's got likes and dislikes, and that's fine. But they've always been great with fruit and veg, and they've always had quite grown-up taste. Where they start. I remember my older daughter eating olives at the age of a year old, and you sort of think, oh my goodness, but she loved them, and that was that kind of thing. She still loves them. I don't talk about what's bad and what's good. We talk more about what the body needs. And I'll say, look, I don't have a problem with you having a bit of sugar in your diet, as long as you're making sure you're eating all the other things you need to help you grow and again, nourish and nurture. And again, when it comes to body image, I mean, the thing that I find fascinating is that we're all so different, and yet we're all trying to achieve this one body type, which is ridiculous. And actually, when you have children, you almost start to see it more clearly, I think. So I've got these 2 daughters, one's 13, one's 11. They are both completely different in terms of their physique. And do they look like me? Not really. So, you've got 3 women in the house, and we're all very, very different. And I think that's the thing that people need to start understanding about body image, is that you have to make the most of what you've got. Some women are going to have very, very long legs, and that's their feature, and that's how they're built. I'm not one of those. I'm 5'2", very, very petite, and that's just the way I'm built, and I can't change that. I can't change my height. I can't change the fact that actually my bones are the size they are. And equally, my daughters are different. My younger daughter is very, very tall. My older daughter, she's pretty average in terms of height, but she's got a different shape to the rest of us. She's very, she's got all the right curves in all the right places. So I'm always trying to help them see themselves for who they are, but also to help them understand that, image is just one aspect of you. And actually what really counts is who you are as a person. And we had a really good discussion about this a few weeks ago. I was driving my older daughter up to her parents' evening, and she was getting all anxious and worried and like, what if I'm not good enough, Mum? What if I haven't got the grades you want me to get? And I said to her, I don't have a problem with what grades you have or my biggest thing to you, and you know this, is that you've just done your best. And if you've done your best, and that's what you can hand on heart tell me, you've done your best, then that's all I need to hear. And I'm not worried about the number and in terms of the grades that you get. I'm more interested in what attitude you have at school, and that's pretty much it. And when we came home, I said, you see, sometimes it doesn't matter about the grades, it's about your attitude. And I think that's one of I suppose that is probably something I really work hard at, is trying to make sure the girls have got the right attitude for life in general, from a nutrition point of view, from an education point of view, from a personal point of view. And I'm always helping them to understand. I mean, when you're 13, I'm sure we can all relate. When you're a teenager, you're always worried about what other people think about you. And I always say to Maya, you can't change what other people think of you. You can't change their perception of you. You have no control over that at all. But what you can change is your perception of the situation. And that's kind of the same thing I repeat again and again and again, because so many times, again, when I've had individuals coming into clinic who are really struggling with their self-belief and their self-worth, they're always focusing on what other people want of them. And I'm like, but it doesn't matter what other people want. It's about liking you from the inside out. And that doesn't change whether you're 55 kilos, 57 kilos, 60 kilos. As long as you are happy with you from the inside out, you can achieve anything. And that's kind of my motto in life, really, if I'm honest.
I absolutely love it. What you can't see is that I'm like actively like nodding along, like yes, I totally agree. And what a fantastic way to bring up your daughters. And I think it is all about that attitude. Now, if we were to go into some of the myths that you must see, I mean, you must see them all the time, whether it's eating kale, whether, the hashtag eating clean, or don't eat this, do you eat this, or all the superfoods, and eat this berry, the goji berry or blueberries, or whatever it may be. What would be some of the myths that you would like to sort of debunk now?
Oh my God, where do I start, Sarah? There are so many. I have to sometimes take myself off social media because I get so angry, and there's only so many things you can get cross with. So, okay, so some of the top few. Let's talk about sugar first, because I've done quite a few presentations over the last few weeks with various coaches and athletes and groups. I do a bit of a true or false section just to kind of get a feel for what people are thinking. So the questions I ask is, carbs make you fat? And
true.
True or false? You see, exactly. People think true, but it's not. It's not true. There is no evidence to suggest that carbohydrates make you fat at all. The problem is that people have got so confused by all the messages out there. If you look at it from a purely scientific, organic point of view, per gram of carbohydrate gives you 3.87 calories. Per gram of protein, 4 calories. Per gram of fat, 9 calories. So it's actually got the lowest calorie value of all food. The problem we have is we have confused what carbohydrates are. So I still very much base my meals, and I advise other people to base their meals around whole grain carbohydrates, good nutrient-dense carbohydrates, as I call them. And that's things like, your oats, your sweet potatoes, your pastas, your rice, sourdough bread, whole grain bread, potatoes, beans, pulses, milk, dairy, those fruit, veg, those sorts of things are what I call nutrient-dense carbohydrate. And I think where we've got confused is that people just see this massive title, carbohydrate. And one of the analogies I always use, again, I think it helps me to put things into perspective, is that if I were to give you a packet of Jelly Babies, you could probably finish a packet of Jelly Babies off without any problems within 10, 15 minutes, perhaps, maybe a little bit longer.
Two minutes.
2 minutes, all right. And you would have consumed 150 grams of carbohydrate. If I was then to give you the equivalent in potatoes, that would be 3 medium-sized baked potatoes. So whilst a lot of my people go, I could do that, it's a lot harder to consume 3 potatoes compared with a whole bag of Jelly Babies. And I think this is where this myth comes from, because it's very easy to overconsume the wrong types of carbohydrate, without a doubt. But it's not easy to overconsume the right types of carbohydrate. They're actually really important from a blood sugar point of view, from a fiber point of view. A lot of them will also give you lots of B vitamins that are really important for metabolism. Some of them will give you iron. Some of them will give you zinc. That there's a lot of different nutrients that are kind of involved in carbohydrates that people are not aware of. And the other thing that people, I think, forget is that the brain works optimally if it's getting a regular supply of carbohydrate. And it needs around 130 grams of glucose a day to work optimally, to keep you thinking, to keep you concentrating, to help make sure that all those processes it controls, like your heart beating, your lungs breathing, all those different things, to make sure it's the nerves contracting, to make sure it's doing all that work, it needs 130 grams of glucose. Now, that's the equivalent of around 6 slices of whole grain bread a day as a minimum. So the whole thing about carbohydrates is that they're not bad for you. I think people do overconsume them, and you need to think about them in relation to what you're doing and your needs, and you need to think about the portions. So again, I would never sit of an evening and eat a massive plate of pasta. I would always have maybe a third of a plate of pasta with some protein and some vegetables. And so you can already see that I get everything I need, but it's just I've rearranged the portion sizes. And this is, I think, where people have gone wrong. People have been eating, big plates of pasta, big plates of rice, and then we're blaming carbohydrates for being overweight. But you only become overweight, you only store excess as fat if you overconsume the number of calories you're actually utilizing. And that can be through anything. So even when you get some athletes going on about, well, I just eat loads of protein, especially some of the bodybuilders and weightlifters, and they just eat huge amounts of protein. Again, if you overconsume the calories you need, you will just put the excess on as body fat. It doesn't matter. And there was a very good example of this. It's quite a few years ago now, but there was a professor who wanted to basically demonstrate that it is all about calories, even though we're told it's not. But he wanted to demonstrate that it was about calories, in that he went on a 1,500 calorie day diet, but all he ate were cream cakes. And while he felt awful because all he was eating was cream cakes, he did lose weight. So it proved a point that you can eat rubbish, and as long as your calorie intake is low, you will still lose weight. But it's not the easiest way of losing weight, because obviously things like protein, carbs, fat help you to regulate your blood sugars. They prevent that disruption in blood sugars. And obviously when you get a low in blood sugars, that's when the body's kind of crying out for, I need more. And that's when you're most susceptible to go into the biscuit barrel or you're that bar of chocolate or whatever. So it's about helping you to regulate your sugar levels, which is quite key.
I mean, I was away last week. I was on this sort of residential project working with young children aged between 15 and 17 on the NCS, the National Citizenship Service.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sticking to my low carb, high fat. So I'd be having pieces of chicken there and broccoli. And I was tasting the broccoli and I was thinking, this just doesn't taste quite right, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then for dinner in the evening, I'm thinking, right, I'll have my piece of chicken and I'll have loads of veg, so loads of carrots, loads of peas, more broccoli. And I was trying to eat lots and lots of the vegetables to sort of fill me up, to stop me, sort of snacking. And then the following day, my cravings for sugar were I just could not stop eating. So we'd be in the staff room and there would be, a packet of chocolate bourbons, and I sat there and ate the whole packet in about 3-4 minutes, just one after the other. Then there was a packet of gingerbread biscuits. I smashed them all. And I started feeling horrendous. So at the end of this, I came back home and I was like, don't know what's wrong with me. Could not work it out, because normally I'm so good and I don't suffer from these cravings. And I was trying to eat clean. And I was speaking to a lady afterwards who is actually diabetic, and she monitors her blood sugar levels, and she wasn't actually cheating. She wasn't eating biscuits or anything. And what she told me was that all the vegetables were they weren't frozen vegetables, so they were from tins. So it was almost like sugar water. And they cooked the broccoli that I was eating in the sugar water. So every lunch and every dinner, I was getting these massive hits of sugar. And I just couldn't understand the reason why my cravings were just going completely insane. And it was all because of the sugar base. And you mentioned it before. And with the sugar, I think, I don't know if you agree with this or not, I think I certainly try and avoid processed foods and sugar as much as possible. But I think people are getting maybe confused with actually replacing that with the honey and the algarve and the coconut sugar and these supposedly good sugars, which are okay for you, but actually they're not.
I agree. I mean, again, massive bugbear of mine are all these health. I mean, you mentioned Deliciously Ella before. She's one of many. I mean, I don't want to just pick on her. There's so many of them who say their products are sugar free, and then you read through their ingredients and it's maple syrup or it's coconut sugar or it's
dates.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sugar is sugar. I'm not going to lie to you. Sugar is sugar. They've all got the same calorie value. So whether your brownie is made with normal sugar or whether your brownie is made with coconut sugar, it's still going to have the same number of calories. Is it healthier? Not particularly. Because again, people get really hung up about white processed sugar. But if you think about sugar, it's just kind of extracted from the sugar cane. It's no different to coconut sugar being extracted from the coconut. It's no different. Do you see what I mean? And it just it makes me really angry that people think they're being healthy because they're having coconut sugar or maple syrup, which costs an absolute bomb. I mean, I'm very much that you should have everything in moderation. It's not very sexy. It's not very glamorous, but it is the way I live my life. And I'm not going to sit here and say I never eat sugar, because I do. I really like the taste of honey, so I do tend to use honey more. But equally, I eat chocolate. I'll have a piece of cake from time to time. I'll indulge in a bowl of ice cream every now and again. It's one of those things that I think people are getting, again, go back to, I don't like the fact that people are being made to feel guilty about using sugar and whatever that form might be. And I wish that, for me, the biggest message would be if we could get the message about actually having a little bit is not going to kill you, but having lots of it may then end up causing potential problems or whatever. That's the message I want to get across, because I just feel that I'm not saying eat cake every day. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying if you do eat cake once a week even, why not just eat it and enjoy it? Don't have any guilt associated with it, because you know what? It's not going to do you any harm. The problem comes when people are eating poorly every single day. If you're waking up every morning and you're having, I don't know, a croissant every morning, and then your lunch is a bacon sandwich and your evening meal is a fry up or a takeaway, and you're doing that every single day, day after day after day, yeah, that's not great for you. But even if you do that for a few days in a row because you're on the road, even that's not going to be harmful. And it is, again, like I said, it's about moderation. And I think you asked me what winds me up. One of the things that winds me up about these health bloggers is that it's very personal. They're using their own personal aspects of nutrition and saying, right, everybody should eat like me. If you eat like me, you'll look like me, you'll behave like me, you'll get my life. And let's face it, they're all really wealthy. They're all really glamorous. I mean, I am yet to come across a non-glamorous health blogger. If you think about the Hemsley sisters, Deliciously Ella, Fern Cotton, Tess Ward, Madeline Shaw, Amelia Greer, they're all beautiful, aren't they? There's not a single one of them that you go, oh, she's a bit of a, whatever. And I worry that this is what people are buying into. They're not actually listening. They're not actually hearing that this could be quite dangerous for some people. Eating like this, it's not suitable for everybody. I don't agree with people removing food groups. So a lot of them are very anti-dairy, and actually dairy is so important for your bone density. You can't get, no matter what you say, I mean, they all say, well, you can get calcium from kale. I mean, you'd have to eat 3 blinking platefuls of kale to get anywhere close to the amount you'd get of calcium in 1 glass of milk. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's these messages, and of course they will listen, because these women, and I mean, I'm saying women, I mean, obviously we've got males as well, but it does seem to be mainly women that are promoting this stuff. And the other thing, I guess, going back to the difference between dietitian and nutrition, is that, as I said earlier, we can't use our own personal antidotal advice, our own, what we do. So I eat in a certain way. That's my choice. I'm not going to say that everybody should eat like me, because it's not going to suit everybody. Not everybody is me. I'm a vegetarian. I always have been, but I don't think necessarily that's the best way to eat. It's just the way I like to eat, and that's personal to me. So what annoys me again is that, you've got the deliciously Ella going on and on and on about her personal autoimmune condition, and this is what saved her. If you actually look at what happened to her, she was eating so badly before. She was what I described just earlier. She was eating lots of processed food, lots of cakes and biscuits and chocolate. She didn't really think about her nutrition. Of course, you're going to feel pretty rubbish. But even if she had just altered her diet slightly and got the whole grain carbs in there, regulated her sugar levels, she probably would have felt better. But she took it to the extreme, and then she's putting everything on. Because she's done that, she now is very, very healthy. The thing about an autoimmune condition is that nobody knows why they happen, and nobody knows how long they'll last. And for some people, they'll come and go. And I can say this because you asked me when we first started chatting about my running background and what I've achieved and what I haven't achieved. And I said to you, yeah, I haven't done much recently. And the reason is that 18 months ago, I did the Gower 50, which was a really tough run, 50 miles all around the Gower Peninsula on the coastal path and on the beaches. And oh my goodness, it was a tough one, but we did it. And after that, I really struggled. So that was October 2014. And I really struggled. I just didn't feel myself for a long, long time, and sort of tried to kind of pick things up. So I gave myself a break and then tried to pick things up again in the new year, was training towards a marathon, but just wasn't getting anywhere, and decided that it wasn't worth putting myself or my family through it if I wasn't feeling amazing. And I guess because I know myself and I know my body, and I monitor things like my heart rate and things like that, something wasn't right. And so I went to the doctors and said, something's not right. I just don't feel great. I'm really struggling. I can't get up hills. It's always been my strength that I'm quite fast up hills, and I can't do it. I just get to the top and I'm literally gasping for air. And I guess initially I thought it was an iron deficiency or something like that. That was my thought process. But I had all my bloods done. Everything came back fine. Slightly low vitamin D, but apart from that, everything else was fine. And I said, something is wrong. I know it's wrong because I don't feel great. And my resting heart rate is ridiculously high for somebody who's as fit as I am. So I had some x-rays done, and there was some abnormalities in my lungs. And I had to go and have more and more tests, and including an endoscopy into the lungs to get a biopsy. And I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called sarcoidosis, which is basically you get granulomas on your lungs, and that affects your ability. It can cause shortness of breath, it can cause malaise, and you get very fatigued. So all the things I've been feeling were related to this. And it was a bit of a blow. I'm not going to lie to you, Sarah. It was a bit of oh my goodness, I do everything right. I eat well, I exercise, I don't smoke, I don't drink that much. And I was devastated. I was just like, oh my God, how can this happen to me? I'm really, really well normally. What's going on? And the reason I'm telling you this story is because I think people believe, because of what they're reading in the media about these health bloggers and health coaches and stuff, people believe that they can control things like autoimmune. They believe they can control certain illnesses. There's no evidence that you can do that. Nutrition is great. Nutrition helps you feel well. There are aspects of nutrition that can really boost your immune system and things like that, definitely. And you can, obviously things like diabetes, we know through studies that if you maintain a good blood glucose control, you're going to have a much better outcome with diabetes and things. But you can't cure things, and nutrition doesn't necessarily cause things. And I think that's the thing that I'm really, really critical of these health bloggers, because they're making you think that if you eat like this, you'll be well, you'll feel better, you'll do, and it's not true. So with my own self, have I changed anything nutritionally? No, because there was nothing to change, if I'm absolutely honest. The only thing I've done is I've listened to my consultant that's told me not to do ultras anymore for the time being, because the effect it would have on my immune, because obviously when you do very, very long distance or very high intensity training, it does have a marked impact on your immune system. And so potentially if my immune system is under stress, it's going to cause more problems. So the last 18 months, I have very much continued to run, but run easy pretty much every day. Some days I feel great and I'll go out and do 10 miles, and some days I don't feel so good and I might do 3, and other days I might go, do you know what, today I'm just going to do yoga in the garden. It just depends on how I feel, and I'm very relaxed about it. I'm very kind of like, well, that was a bit of a sign that my body wasn't coping, so let's just chill things out a little bit. And I'm pleased to say that this summer particularly, I've definitely started to feel much better than I did 18 months ago. And recently been out to Chamonix to do some training camps with Robbie Britton in terms of helping him run a training camp, and was said to him, look, Robbie, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do these massive long runs you want to do over the weekend. And he goes, well, just come and give it a go, and actually felt fine. So I don't know where my autoimmune condition is at the moment, because I'm waiting to have another review at the hospital in terms of they check you every 4 to 5 months just to see what state your lungs are in and that kind of stuff. But I feel better. And I guess, again, the main message I'm trying to get across is that I feel better, not through changing my diet, but actually through listening to my body and resting a bit more and building things up slowly. And I think that's the thing. You can't fix autoimmune conditions. And it's likely that all these individuals that say that they fixed their autoimmune condition through their diet, probably their autoimmune conditions would have got better anyway on their own accord, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. I know so many people will be able to relate to what you're saying, and I'm so glad that you are feeling better. And it's like you said, it's actually sometimes it is listening to your body. I mean, when I was doing my training for Marathon des Sables, there were some days where I was just thinking I couldn't work out if I was being lazy or I was just sort of exhausted. And it's that difficult balance of wanting to do the training and give it your all and try your hardest, and that sort of that feeling of guilt, which I don't know if men get it as well, but I know a lot of women do suffer from it. It's like, oh, really, I've got to give it my all. It's almost this perfection tendencies. Now, one of the things I would be interested in asking you is about sort of recovering, or how you recover after, whether that's after training. I mean, one of the things that I do, if I come back after a heavy weight session, I will slam down a protein shake with extra L-glutamine in, and that's whether that's after a long run or a weight session. That's what I'll do. It's also, it's like my automatic habit that I do, and it makes me feel as though I'm helping my body to recover. But I was just wondering what your thoughts are around sort of protein shakes, whether you think that they're, I'm trying not to use the word good or bad, but whether or not you think they're beneficial or not, or whether we should be able to get all of our recovery and supplements, etc., through food, or whether actually the protein shakes can help in that. So,
as you've probably gathered, I'm very much about food first, as much as possible. But that doesn't mean I'm opposed to people using products. But I think it very much depends on the situation you're in, the type of training session you've done. So, for example, the squad, the Great Britain wheelchair basketball women's squad, are in Holland at the moment. Their last competition pre-Rio. Because they're away, we have to give them things that are convenient. And so in that situation, I do tend to sometimes suggest, okay, actually pack a few protein shakes, because post-game, particularly if you've played 40 minutes and it's been high intensity, and I don't know if you've ever watched wheelchair basketball, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
So for them, I've been like, right, yeah, we need to pack some things, because it's just easier. You can add water to these products and it's done. It's quick and easy. When they're at home, we will try and get them to actually use real food. So I'll get them to try and use milk, maybe actually eat food, because Again, I think we've been sold this message that you need to have protein immediately after training. You need to have a certain type of protein immediately after training. But again, if you look at the studies, our bodies are absolutely amazing. And they are very good at getting what they need as long as we're providing it to them. And it doesn't necessarily mean within a 2-hour window or even a 6-hour window, but as long as we're providing them with all the nutrients they need, it will get what it needs. So there was a study done earlier last year which looked at resistance training, and it gave half the group whey protein post-resistance training and half the group a steak post-resistance training, and then did muscle biopsies every couple of hours afterwards. And what they found was that the group that took whey protein, they had an increase in branched chain amino acids initially in the first 2 hours, but then nothing. And with the steak group, they didn't have a very raised level in the first 2 hours, but 5 hours afterwards, they were really high. So the body will still use all those amino acids in the same way. And I think people get very, very hung up that they must have a protein shake immediately after a weight session. But even if you were to give your body a proper meal, like, eggs on toast or Greek yogurt and muesli or whatever, depending on the time of day you're training, your body will still be able to get the proteins it needs in order to help that muscle protein synthesis and recovery. So the only time I tend to recommend something like a protein shake, like I said, one is if it's convenient. So if you're away and it's just you can't get your hands on something of a decent quality protein, then that's quite useful. Or secondly, if you're doing more than one session in a day and there's not much time for recovery in between, then it can be quite a useful format to have. There are obviously loads of products on the market. There's, we've talked about protein, but obviously you've got gels, you've got energy drinks, you've got different types of supplements. So, you talked about
L-glutamine.
L-glutamine, yeah. And obviously you've got all different ones, vitamin D, omega-3.
I take those as well.
Yeah. And so, again, which ones do I recommend? Vitamin D is one I've always recommended because I do think in this country particularly, we really struggle to get enough of sunlight to make vitamin D in our body. So it is one I tend to recommend. And particularly for an immune function point of view, it's very, very important to try and take that through the winter months, very much so. Omega-3, it does depend whether you like oily fish or not. If you are you're a consumer of salmon, mackerel, all those things, and you can manage 2 portions a week, you're probably going to get enough of what you need. If you're not, then yeah, a supplement can be quite beneficial. The only other thing I tend to recommend as a supplement would be something like probiotics. And again, I tend to recommend a supplement rather than the drinks you can buy in the supermarket because it's varied to how much actual culture they've got in them and how beneficial that is. But we know that giving a probiotic, particularly 12 weeks before a major competition, can be very useful from an immune function point of view and can prevent upper respiratory tract infections, or at least help prevent upper respiratory tract infections. So I always recommend it. So all my athletes going to Rio, they're all on probiotics at the moment because obviously we're not far off now from the games. Other supplements, it's very much needs basis. So if you've got somebody who's low in iron, then you might consider an iron supplement. If you've got somebody who's low in B12, then you might consider a B12 supplement. But it will be after an assessment that I would discuss that and work that one out. When it comes to energy products, again, it's very much about the situation you're in. You did MDS. That's a massive, massive race, and you're going to need to think about keeping on top of your energy stores throughout that. So things like gels, things like bars, things like the shots, energy drinks, they're all very, very useful. But again, you've got to work out what you need, what works for you, and is that what you want to use? Because some people don't like using those products. They prefer to use jelly babies or bananas or sandwiches or whatever. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it is very much individual. It does depend on the situation. It depends on you as an athlete, what your requirements are, what you're trying to achieve, what your goal is. And that's, I guess, why I don't like giving generic advice, because every single person I work with gets something different. Even within the wheelchair basketball squads, they've all got different plans because they've all got different needs and different requirements.
It's all so individual and just based on what people are doing, what training they're doing, what they specifically need. So it's so incredibly personalized. Now, I know that you have written a book. I'm also very conscious of time because I know you want to get off on your holiday. So you've actually got the girls like, come on, mum, let's go. But do you just want to quickly mention your book and just tell us a little bit about that?
So actually, Training Food came out in April 2015. It's basically a book about... I suppose it's been split into sections. The first section is very much about sports science and how the body works and what you need to be thinking about when you embark on any sort of training. And the second part is very much about different sports. So we've tried to cover as many sports as possible, but obviously you can appreciate there's a limit to what you can cover. So we've got a section on running, a section on cycling, a section on triathlon, a section on swimming, and then there's a very small section on kind of like multi-sprint sports, like team sports. It's not massive, but there's I think if you read the book, you get the concept of what you need to do, because it's very much about helping you tailor your nutrition according to the training sessions you're doing. So as long as you're aware of, is it a high intensity, is it resistance training, is it low intensity, is it a recovery session, you can pick the kind of information you need from it. And then we've tried to make it as practical as possible, because the one thing that I get quite a lot of feedback on is so many nutritionists and dietitians just give out, well, not dietitians particularly, but nutritionists just give out information about you need this many grams of carbs or you need this. And people look at you and go, what on earth does that look like? So the biggest thing about Training Food was trying to make it very accessible to everybody. There's no weird and wonderful ingredients. I think the most complicated ingredient in there is probably avocado. I'm not, I've already said I'm not into all these weird and wonderful things that you need to buy from particular shops. And so there's loads of recipes, 100 recipes in the back, ranging from breakfast through to snacks and even some desserts, believe it or not. And there's also some practical plans so you can pick up. If you're doing a low intensity day, you can look at the low intensity day and think, oh yeah, that looks quite good. I'll follow that, and so on. So Training Food was out last year, and actually, believe it or not, yesterday I just received my first copies of the 2 new books that are coming out this October, and they are called Fast Fuel. And one is Food for Running Success, and the other one is Food for Triathlon Success. So they're very specific to those 2 sports. And again, I think the publishing company were really keen to just make it. I think although Training Food has done really, really well and people like it, the individual sports were like, I want a bit more information about running. I want a bit more information about triathlon. So we've written these 2 and they're out in October.
Oh, fantastic. Absolutely amazing. Rennie, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast and sharing more about your background, how you became this nutritionist. I can't even say the word, the dietitian. It's just such a fascinating subject. I mean, it's something that you could, even just one tiny aspect of it, whether that's the protein shakes or the hydration or the sugar or the recovery or what you eat after training or before training, you could just go so in depth on every single section. So thank you so much for sharing your own personal story as well. I think that's absolutely fascinating. And there's so many words of advice, but I think the key thing which stood out for me is that word balance, because it's something that I personally massively struggle with in all aspects of my life. When you read all these things, you start thinking, well, I can't eat carbs, right? So no bread, no pasta, no rice, no white potatoes. Even now I find sweet potatoes too sweet and they're almost too starchy. Do I need to cut them out of my diet? And, I beat myself up around having chocolate and saying yes to my sugar cravings. But actually, I think if people could find the balance and just be happy about, and they eat their piece of cake and they enjoy it and live that life of moderation, I think it would be absolutely fantastic. Now, where would be the best place for people to go and find you? I know you've got a new website. Do you want to share the details of that?
Yeah, so my new website is renniemcgregor.com, nice and simple. And there's a lot of information about me there. You can contact me through the website. It's probably the best way to get hold of me. Or I'm on Twitter. So again, you can find me on Twitter.
What's your Twitter handle?
@McGregor_Rennie.
Fantastic. I will be putting all of the links to Rennie's website in the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com. But please do go check her out. Check out her book, Training Food. Absolutely fantastic. And follow her on Twitter. Rennie, thank you so much for coming on Tough Girl Podcast and sharing your story.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
A massive thank you to Rennie for coming on the Tough Girl podcast and sharing more about her own personal story and her own journey, and providing us with tip-top information about nutrition especially. And I mean, we've said it throughout the podcast, but it does come down to balance. It does come down to moderation, and it all comes down to you as well. Food is very, very personal. It depends very much on what you're training for, what your goals are. And you are the only, you know yourselves best, and you've got to decide what is right for you. If you want to cut gluten out of your diet, if you want to eat clean, if you want to take supplements, if you want to have protein shakes, if you want to eat everything and anything, that's completely up to you. It does come down to your own personal choice. If you're wanting sort of more information about sort of my personal battles with food and eating, trying to eat healthily and dealing with candida, there's loads more information on the blog, which is at toughgirlchallenges.com. So you can go and check it out, and you can see what type of stuff I was eating, how I was finding it, and why I decided to cut sugar out of my life for 3 weeks. And it's still a battle I continue to have now with my sugar addiction. But all the information to Rennie's book, to her website, to her Twitter handle will be on the show notes. So go and check it out at Tough Girl Challenges. And so a couple of thank yous. So thank you to everyone who has been listening. We are now at 85,000 downloads, which is incredible. So we are so on target for reaching 100,000. I'd love to be able to do it by the 4th of August, which will be the 1-year anniversary of the Tough Girl podcast. So please keep listening. Please keep sharing. Tell your friends about the Tough Girl podcast. Tell your colleagues about it, and just spread the word. That would be absolutely fantastic. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, hit that subscribe button, and please do leave a review. So there's been so much stuff happening in the Tough Girl tribe. So just a few shout outs. So a massive well done to Ellen and to Kay, who both did the Thunder Run, which is a 24-hour relay on a 10K trail through hilly fields and woodlands. So absolutely fantastic achievement. Thank you for sharing the photos in the Facebook group. It was really, really great. Great to see those stunning, stunning pictures. And if you haven't heard of the Tough Girl tribe, what the tribe is I set up a closed Facebook group in order for the listeners of the podcast to connect with each other, in order to meet similar-minded women who have similar goals and aspirations, who are looking for support, who are looking for encouragement, who are looking for advice, whether that's on doing their own personal challenges, which could be running a 5K, it could be touching their toes, it could be just getting out of the house, it could be doing a massive ultra. It honestly doesn't matter what the challenge is, as long as it's personal to you and it's challenging to you. This is not about comparison. It's not about saying, oh, but I'm not as tough as other people. I haven't done an Ironman. I haven't run an ultra. I haven't run a marathon. It's honestly not about that. It's more about getting help and support and sharing, stuff that you want to do, asking for advice and asking for tips. So it's an incredibly supportive community. So please do come and find us. It's a closed Facebook group. This is the only place I mention it, and it is purely for the listeners of the Tough Girl podcast to connect. And what else do we have happening? Now, you may have seen this on my Twitter feed if you follow me on Twitter at _tough_girl, but there is a fantastic challenge happening called Simply Runderful. And what this is there's 2 awesome girls called Marina and Lucha. I hope I am saying your name right, so I do apologize if I'm saying it wrong. And they are doing an incredible challenge, and what they're doing, the hashtag is 500k in 5 days. And what they're going to be doing is they are going to be heading off to the Netherlands to run 500 kilometers in 5 days in only their pink underwear. And the reason they're doing this is to raise money for the Pink Ribbon Foundation, which is raising money for breast cancer. So I will be including the link to their Just Giving website where you can go and donate to them. So justgiving.com/simply-runderful. And you can also follow them on Twitter at runningdutchie, DUTCHIE, and Ranjha, MRANGER 90. Absolutely fantastic challenge. Do go along, do support them. Absolutely brilliant. Now, you may remember last August we had Sophie Radcliffe on the Tough Girl podcast, and she shared more about her journey of leaving the world of blogging and basically becoming a endurance athlete. And she is from Challenge Sophie, and one of the challenges that she did was doing the first Alpine to Alpine, this incredible cycling journey. And one of her big goals was to do a TED Talk, and Sophie actually achieved this dream, which is brilliant. So her talk is called Achieve Your Extraordinary, and her TED Talk is now up on YouTube. I've got a link to it on my YouTube channel, so you can go and see it there. But Sophie shares like her 3 key learnings and hopes it will inspire you to achieve your extraordinary. If you haven't heard of TED Talks before, go and check them out. There's loads of fantastic content on them. I've got a selection of about 15, 16 TED Talks on my YouTube channel, which I personally find very inspirational, and it's from other women who've gone on to share their stories. So if you haven't listened to her podcast, go back and check it out and go and watch her TED Talk. Absolutely fantastic. So have a wonderful week, everybody. I hope all your challenges are going well for the month of July. I can't believe it is almost the end of July. I don't know where the time is going, but I'll be back next Tuesday for another episode of the Tough Girl podcast, and it will be coming out at 7 a.m. in the morning.